What's up, friends? Today we're going to be reviewing the new season of Outer Banks. So, I don't know if you guys remember, but Outer Banks Season 1 came out a couple years past and it had fantastic reception immediately upon release. Pretty much everybody had watched it or was going through the process of watching it, and a lot of people were waiting on Season 2, and it's finally here. So Season 2 just dropped 2021. It has a total of 10 episodes. And each episode ranges between 47 and 57 minutes long. And in case you haven't watched Season 1 or you haven't had the chance to go back, I don't know if I will make a review on Season 1 specifically. So I'm going to leave things relatively vague in this review, so that if you haven't watched Season 1, you can go back, catch up, and then watch Season 2, and it won't be spoiled by what I say in this review. Essentially, Season 2 picks up exactly where Season 1 left off. And the show revolves around a group of kids who stumbled upon a mystery that unraveled into quite a big deal. So in Season 1, they stumbled upon a compass belonging to one of the main characters' dads, which essentially led them to treasure. But as everyone knows, with treasure and money comes danger, and so they had a lot of people gunning for them. A lot of chaos ensued in Season 1, and this season picks up right after that. So in case you aren't familiar with what Outer Banks is essentially about, the best way I can describe it is it's a group of kids unraveling a mystery that leads to long lost treasure. A mystery that has its roots deep in the community they live in. A mystery that involves high ranking and powerful individuals in the community. Now, I can be more specific and talk more about what exactly the mystery is or what they're looking for or how it all goes down, but I think with this show specifically, it's best if you discover it for yourself. And I'll explain more as to what I mean about that in a second, but essentially the less you know about Outer Banks, the new season and the old season, the less you know, the better of an experience you'll have watching it. So for this season and for this show specifically, I wouldn't even recommend watching any trailers or anything like that. It's really best if you go into it knowing nothing, expecting nothing, because your mind will be blown. Now, the reason I said I don't want to explain too much is essentially because this show does such a fantastic job of involving you as a viewer. And I don't mean that by breaking the third wall. They're not doing any of that kind of stuff. But instead, it has a unique way of making you feel like you're there with the characters on this journey. It really makes you feel like you're a Pogue. And if you haven't heard the word Pogue, it's essentially a term used to classify a specific class of people in this show. And that whole system is so classist and it's very caustic. But the beautiful thing is these characters have found a way to take what is usually a slur, Pogue, which is what kind of like the rich people use to classify all the poorer people. But these characters have taken that term and classified it for themselves and redefined it for themselves, and that's what makes it even more powerful. So essentially, the show does such a fantastic job of putting you in the gang of Pogues and letting you live this adventure out with them. And when stuff's going down, you feel like you're in the heat of the battle. When things are going really well, you feel happy, you feel proud. The show is fantastic, and that leads to my next point. Outer Banks has a really unique way of making you smile. This show is something that will really take you out of whatever situations you're in, whatever world you're in, whatever you're doing, it will suck you in. It has a really unique way of setting this scene in a very beautiful and eloquent way that is endearing. It makes you feel like you want to be in the settings there are, even if they are dangerous settings, while also providing you characters to follow that are so engaging and so lovable, and you really want to be part of the gang, essentially. I have to throw out credit to the 5 main characters of this show because they kill it in terms of acting. Chase Stokes, who plays the role of John B, as I mentioned before. Madeline Klein, who plays the role of Sarah Cameron. Madison Bailey, who plays the role of Kiara. Jonathan Davis, who plays the role of Pope. And then Rudy Pankina, who plays the role of JJ. All these characters are so fantastic, and by the end of the series, you're gonna fall in love with them, and I can guarantee you that. And the beauty about these characters is that they're very three-dimensional and realistic. They have their flaws, they have their strong points, but more than that, they are such a tight-knit and amazing friend group and community and you can really feel that through the screen. Now, one thing this season did really well that I think the last season lacked a little bit was it developed all these characters equally. I don't know about you guys, but in the last season, I kind of got the feeling that the show really focused on John B and Sarah Cameron specifically. And it did, you know, a lot of the original episodes, almost even 3/4 of the first season, were really focused on Sarah Cameron and John B's relationship, you know, their situations, their development, stuff like that. The other characters were vital, but they weren't focused on as much, and their stories weren't developed to the extent as they are in season 2. Season 2 does a fantastic job of kind of putting John B and Sarah Cameron not on the back burner, but reducing how much of the story revolves around them, and instead adding in intricate plot points and amazing backstories for the other 3 characters, all of which were fantastic, right? Now, one thing I will say, some of the situations that these characters get into can be pretty predictable, especially the way that Outer Banks, the series, sets them up. Like, you'll see a scene starting to unfold, and then it'll immediately cut to other characters who aren't in the scene, but have nefarious plots. And it's pretty obvious to see as to how the scene will go down now that you know that these characters are involved. So in that way, it is kind of predictable in that once you start to see the pattern, it's very obvious to tell as to what will happen. But that does not mean that what happens is not engaging. Even if you know what's going to happen, it's the way it goes down and watching these characters deal with those situations that really hooks you and draws you in and keeps you engaged. The plot itself also has many twists and turns that some of which you might see coming, but most of which are going to blindside you a little bit. And I think that's the point. But with that caveat comes the idea that, you know, some of the things aren't necessarily realistic. So don't go into the show expecting realism and expecting, you know, for it to be grounded in reality. More so, expect drama and expect the chaos, and just be ready for an adventure of a lifetime. The Outer Banks series also has this really unique thing they do that I think will be pretty obvious as to any new viewers, but if you're a fan of the series for a while, you might not catch it anymore as you get used to it pretty quickly, but they put an orange tint on pretty much everything. And it's weird because there's a lot of films in the past and shows in the past that have done something similar, but almost always the orange tint kind of draws you out of it and doesn't really integrate well with the show. For example, a lot of films set in remote locations overseas, for example in Mexico or any setting that's not in the United States, a lot of films go with the strategy of putting an orange tint on it. And, you know, usually it's pretty jarring and doesn't help the scene whatsoever. And oftentimes it seems a little bit racist because it's like, those countries don't look any different than ours, you know? It's not like everything there is orange. It's weird. A lot of shows do it and it just makes the scenes look dusty and it just doesn't help. Outer Banks, on the other hand, somehow masters it. Their orange tint is less of a jarring, like, oh, this is a foreign place kind of vibe, but more it's inviting, and it makes you feel like, oh, I'm watching Outer Banks specifically. So I'm curious as to what you guys think about this tint. It's very pervasive, and it's in every episode and even in the trailers, so you'll probably notice it pretty quickly, but let me know in the comments below if it does bother you. I, for one, love it, but I am very curious as to if it hits some viewers a little bit differently. Now, finally, this show has a fantastic soundtrack. If you're a fan of folk or alternative songs, indie rock type songs, you're gonna love this show. There are plenty of throwbacks and plenty of songs that you're gonna recognize from the past, as well as some new ones thrown in, all of which help to further draw you into the story. And they're so well placed as to evoke emotion in specific times, or to convey a specific emotion in specific times. They really do a fantastic job of when to start the music and at what volume and when to increase and when to, you know, the editing is stunning in this show. So all in all, for Outer Banks Season 2, I give this show a 4 out of 4 as in fantastic, totally worth watching. Now usually for my 4 out of 4s, I reserve those for shows that really convey some unique message, that really go above and beyond, that are really fantastic in terms of powerful and, you know, must watches for everybody. But Outer Banks just does it for me. And because of that, I can't not give it a 4 out of 4. Something about it is just so engaging and makes me want to live in the Outer Banks, you know? I personally liked season 2 a little bit more than season 1, to be honest, but both were fantastic and totally worth watching. And just because of that, I have to give the show a 4 out of 4. Highly recommend to any adventure, mystery fans, anyone who is a fan of like a group of youth going up against the world. So all in all, let me know in the comments below if you have checked out Outer Banks season 2 already, what you thought about it, if you liked it or not. Also, let me know if you watched season 1 and what you thought about that season as well. And if you see any differences between the two, let me know in the comments below. So this show is rated TVMA, but it's mainly for language, which itself isn't as strong either, but I'll explain more in a second. So in terms of violence, I give the show a 3.5 out of 5. There is blood, and there is violence in terms of there's gunfights and there's hand-to-hand combat. None of it is too gory or graphic. A lot of the fight scenes are shaky cam. There's a lot of avoiding conflict and instead choosing the peaceful route. And because of that, I think this show would be not fantastic for, but would be appropriate for a little bit of a wider audience because it does do a good job of avoiding violence and showing you that violence is not always the answer. But beyond that, the show also does a fantastic job of really stressing the point that killing and murder is not good in any way. And so because of that, violence is not a big factor in this show. Now, these things do occur, right? But they're stressed as bad and consequences are shown clearly. And it's obvious as to how the show characterizes bad people as those who kill and those who harm others, and good people as those who help others and those who provide justice. So in that sense, it is a relatively good watch for a little bit of a wider audience. Now in terms of sexual content, I give the film a 3 out of 5. There is a little bit of sexual content. None of it is seen. It's all just discussions. But there's one relationship specifically where they discuss sexual relations briefly. It's not too graphic. If you don't know what they're talking about, you wouldn't understand. In that sense, it's really relatively mild. And then finally, in terms of language, I give this show a 4 out of 5. Now, the F word is used every once in a while. It's not frequent and it's not pervasive. However, the S word, the D word, and the B word are used frequently and commonly. And a lot of the characters in stressful situations swear, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for younger audiences who aren't familiar with a little bit of strong language. So all in all, I would say because violence is stressed in a specific way, and because there's very limited sexual content, as long as your target audience is familiar with a little bit of strong language and can discern what is good and what is bad, they should be okay to watch the show. Even though it is TVMA, I think a little bit of younger audiences can watch it. However, it probably won't be suitable for youth or early teens. So all in all, highly recommend checking out Outer Banks Season 2. Let me know in the comments below if you have, what your thoughts are. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later.